be a doer, not a gunner.
Our guest this week works with his consultancy Illuminate to connect people from different industries so they can open new frames of reference and attack their business challenges in new, innovative ways. He has worked in roles from frontline operations to senior management, and he has founded Traveling Dads and Traveling Mums, a company that creates amazing stories written with kids, by kids, and for kids. Today, we are honored to have Mark Pigram speaking to us.
Thanks so much for being with us today, Mark, and we're super excited to hear about all the various hats you wear, so go ahead.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Spencer. Yeah, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us. It's lovely to be invited to talk a little bit about some of the things I've been doing over the last few years. A super quick bit of background on me. I live in Australia. I studied chemical engineering as an undergrad, worked at Caltex at their oil refineries here for 10 years after that, then started my own management consulting business about 10 years ago, and saw that go through some pretty high peaks and some pretty low troughs. And now I'm consulting on my own and writing and publishing kids' books, as well as doing some other random things like Uber driving and driving freight stuff around the country to get across borders that are closed because of COVID restrictions. So I'm never one to sit still for too long, I guess you could say. So where do the kids' books come from? A bit of background on that. Probably, I've got 3 kids, Hamish, Lachlan and Isla. They're 11, nearly 10 and nearly 7. And probably 8 years ago, I guess it would be, the very start of it came from, and if any of you have kids, you'll understand this. I got sick and tired of my kids asking me to read them the same story every night. So it was just like mayhem. You're getting asked to read the same thing every night, and I was going crazy. So I said to them one night, well, why don't we make up a story? And this was before Isla was born. And the boys said, well, what does that mean? And I got out my phone and hit record and just said, well, let's make a story up. Once upon a time, there was a dragon named Hamish and a dinosaur named Lachlan, and then started getting the kids involved in how the story would actually go and flow. And then later we would listen back to the to the story and have a good laugh about it. And it was really fun because it really sparks their imagination, and the plot just goes in any and every direction. So from a purist perspective, reading my books or reading our books, you probably have a fair few darts to throw at the layout and how the story flows, but it's because it's developed organically with kids who are between sort of 3 and 8 years old when we created them. So we kept doing it, and we've probably written about a dozen stories, I guess now. Then I'd play them back to my kids, to entertain them, and also their cousins, and they'd all got a kick out of it. And so to make it a bit easier, I started transcribing them. So I'd listen back to the audio and type up the script. So we had something a little bit more coherent. And then I went to the MIT bootcamp in 2018. So by this stage, we probably had about 10 stories written. Didn't really know what to do with them at that point, but the bootcamp, gave me a really good push and an idea of different approaches and ways to attack it. So I thought, okay, well, first thing first, we've got to get one of these illustrated and published and see how that goes. Going into the market and considering how competitive it is in the kids' book space, the boot camp sort of really gave me some good ideas in terms of thinking differently about how we could approach differentiating the book. And so the big differentiator for our books is that it comes with a mobile application, which is free, and that lets you record your own version of the story into the app. So the branding for us is primarily Traveling Dads and Traveling Mums. And the concept is that when you're traveling away as a mum or a dad, you could record yourself reading a story into the app. So then when you're away, your kids could play it back, hear mum or dad reading to them, follow along with the book, or listen to it in the car or whatever, but have a familiar voice reading to them when, for whatever reason, if it's shift work or if it's fly in, fly out work or separated parents even, kids can still hear their loved ones' voices. So that's the differentiator for us. So when we put the first bit together, this is the first book, The Dinosaur Kropeck. And you'll see on the website that a lot of the background is still sort of heavily based around this. But then we chose 6 books which appear in the front. So each of these rows is a book. And this page is called the Character Hall of Fame. And the idea about that is that as we publish each book, more of the characters are unlocked to be a bit of a driver for kids to want to get the next one. This is the latest one. So this is the 3rd book that we've illustrated and published. And you can see it's got its characters showing up. And then up here, it's got the first character from the next book. So again, trying to create a little bit of interest and reason for kids to want to get the next book and see what's coming next. Some of the other things that we've done, the way the books are written and put together, the kids are the characters in them. So there's Lachlan the T-Rex, there's Isla the giant squid, there's Hamish the megalodon, Hamish the woolly mammoth, Isla the baby mouse, Isla the beautiful giant. And they're all created by the kids. We choose the names, and once we've made the story up. What I wanted to do is just show you briefly how we do the illustrations. So with the illustrations, and the first book, we got to the point of having the script ready and had the app starting to be developed. But then realised, well, I can't draw to save myself. So what am I going to do? And fortuitously, about that time, I picked up a graphic designer in my Uber in Brisbane and was giving her a lift to a job interview. And we got chatting. It was only about a 10-minute Uber ride. And we got chatting, and she said she was into graphic design but was doing a lot of corporate stuff, wanted to branch out into something a bit more interesting, and said she'd done some kids' book illustrations. So we set up a coffee meeting after that and had a few discussions about it. And she's now in the process of illustrating our 4th book out of the first series of 6. So I guess the takeaway there for me is always be open to expanding your network wherever those opportunities might pop up. Basically, what we do in the illustration process is get the script, and then I'll sit down and do a reading with the kids and sometimes with their cousins, where we just read through the script, and I get them to tell me, well, what is it that they're seeing? What are they imagining each scene might look like? From there, we jot that down in a scene sequence, and so then that lets us figure out how many pages we're going to need, and then we jump online, take photos of the kids in various poses and things like that for how we want the images to look, and put all that into a PowerPoint pack with the script for each page, and that then we send that to the illustrator, and that's the starting point for it. So then Julia will work on the hero characters, so the main characters first, to get the what they're going to look like and all the colors and rendering and things like that, right? And then she'll start working on the backgrounds and sending it to us backwards and forwards and things like that, until we land on the final outcome. A couple of other things just to show you before I throw it to Spencer and Nancy. I did a trial. So I don't know if in the States or in the UK, your grocery stores have got collectible things that you can collect. So like over here at Woolworths and Coles, the main supermarkets, if you spend $30 and they're running a promotion, you might get a little Ushi figurine. If you spend $60, you get 2 of them, and there's a whole collection and things like that. So some of the different PMR marketing channels that I've gone down have involved exploring those things. So what we did was we made character cards for each of the characters in the series. And so think of a Pokemon card, if you're familiar with Pokemon cards, where each of the characters had different personality traits and different strengths and weaknesses. And we included things like empathy and resilience and that sort of stuff, and gave it an overall rating. And the concept was to see if the supermarkets would want to use those as collectibles. And then once the kids had collected a whole series of cards, then they could have a bigger purchase and then get a free book to go with it. So the trouble or the holes that they pointed in that was that, given it's not really a mainstream brand as yet, probably be hard to get traction initially, because they're working with the likes of Disney and Pixar and places like that with some of their collectibles at the moment. But all the same, it was a good experience to go through that. Didn't cost much money or take too much effort, but it's a good, I guess, just reinforcing the PMR and testing and figuring out what works, what's going to strike a chord and what isn't. The other thing I just wanted to point out that we've added in, and this is more from, a couple of things actually. Anyone familiar with the Richard Scarry books from a long time ago? When I was growing up, I used to love reading the Richard Scarry books, and there's one book, and I forget which one it's called, but there's a little character called Goldbug, and it's this little golden bug that drives a little yellow bulldozer, and you had to find where Goldbug was on each of the pages, and he, in different spots, only certain parts of this little bug was showing. So in the latest book, we've actually got a little man called Illuminate Man, which is my consulting business. So that's Illuminate Man on the little dozer, and on every page, Illuminate Man's hidden somewhere for the kids to find. And probably the last thing before I throw it over is in the back of each of the books, we've got all the main character wireframe illustrations. So the purpose of these is that kids can either pull them out of the book and colour them in and name them, or on the website you can download each of these for free and print them out and use them for colouring in purposes with your kids and stuff like that. My kids love colouring in, and it's just an added little extra, I suppose, that we're trying to put together with the books. So that's a bit of a rundown on what I've done, where we're at the moment. We've got our Apple iOS app is out and running and has been for a bit over 6 months. And the Android app is going to, fingers crossed, release before Christmas. We found the process for that a bit more cumbersome, I guess, just to get through all the hoops that Google needs you to get through compared to the Apple one. So that's taken a little bit longer, but that's where we're up to. So I might open it back up to Nancy and Spencer or anyone else with any questions. Happy to take.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. I really, I'm biased because I love what you do, and I've already become one of your happy customers. So I didn't actually know about the app until I looked at the Facebook page. I think it's a really neat way to kind of continue on that personalization that you're doing. You kind of talked a little bit about the link between what you do at Illuminate and Traveling Dads in the sense of your network and your little Illuminate man. But I was honestly wondering, as an entrepreneur and the amount of thought and energy you put into Traveling Dads, how do you find balance between like consulting and being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, good question, Nancy. I actually find it almost balances itself in a way. So when I had a pretty ordinary experience nearly 4 years ago where I had to close my consulting business down and sack 30 people because I'd made some poor decisions in terms of putting various people into leadership roles, and I didn't manage them, and my other business partner didn't manage them well enough, and they drove the business in the wrong direction and into an unsustainable position. So that was pretty hard, having to shut something down completely that you'd started 7 years earlier, sack 30 people who were relying on their jobs for employment and the like. And at the same time, I had my marriage sort of broke down and I've separated from my wife and all of that sort of thing. So it was a pretty ordinary time. But when I crawled out from under my rock that I hid under for a month or two after that experience, I told myself that I've got to do focus on three things. One was not to go and start another consulting business that relied on full-time employees straight away, at least, because that was one of the downfalls of our business model. We had 45 full-time employees, and so when there were dips in the market, we didn't have any flexibility to move. The second was to spend a bit of time every week on working on product concepts. So things that are going to build annuity revenue, and you don't have to, work full time at it, but just set some time aside every week to, work on that. I'm trying to think what the third one was. It was that long ago. I think it was just focus on the kids and spend time with them and, work on being a good dad. So I try and put a bit of time aside every week to, work on this stuff. And I guess because I'm driving the timetable, that there isn't a hard and fast, okay, we have to, do things by a certain time. I'm more about, making sure the product's right, making sure the kids like it, and, making sure it looks right and feels right for what we want it to be. And, then things like COVID come up. So our original plan for this year was to publish 2 books, the third and fourth. So we published this one back in March. And then I've really gone slowly on publishing the fourth one because you could imagine it's a bit hard pushing a traveling dads and traveling mums branded product when nobody's traveling because of COVID-19. So you never know what things are sort of going to be thrown at you. And then the reason I say it kind of drives itself in terms of the timing and finding space for it is in my consulting work, I've just finished 2 months ago a 15-month engagement with Air Niugini in Papua New Guinea, working with their engineering and maintenance division, doing a capability uplift program with one other colleague. So the last 6 months of last year, I was in New Guinea 20 times. Haven't been able to go up this year. So we had to finish the project remotely, but that was full on and busy. And so I was only dipping my toe in the water on the traveling dads and traveling mum stuff through that period. Now that's come off. I've ramped up the focus on this. And if you wind back 2 years before that Air New Guinea gig, I actually had a period of time consulting where the market was just dead. And I had 5 months without any consulting work at all. And that was really hard financially. But had I not had that gap, I wouldn't have had the time to focus as much as I did on getting the first book illustrated and the first app, up and running and getting things kickstarted. So that's a bit of how I approach it.
Thank you very much for going so in depth on that with us, Mark. I really do appreciate it. And one thing this is kind of a bit of a more selfish question. So I'm originally from Brisbane as well. I moved to the UK about 4 years ago. We actually both studied at UQ. And so I wanted to ask you about the entrepreneurial climate in Brisbane. When I was there, my impression before leaving was very much that it's against starting anything new or things like that, just as a sort of culture. And I thought if you could give your perspective on that, that would really enlighten me.
Yeah, sure, Spencer. Probably 5 years ago when the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull was in power, there was a big push on innovation and creativity and things like that. And there was a fair bit of money washing around the industry across the whole country for entrepreneurial and innovative ideas and setting up businesses and grants and all of that sort of thing. And what in Brisbane that I've noticed what that created was a lot of collaborative workspaces and incubation hubs and that sort of thing. The trouble though with a lot of them that I've found, and this is still the case that I see at the moment, is right young people going out into these incubation hubs and collaborative workspaces and things like that, trying to do things, but they're not being matched with some seasoned business people who've actually been in business for a while and know how to, pick the eyes out of a good innovation and see what can actually be marketed and sold. So you got all these great ideas and great people coming up with fabulous ideas, but I think there's a lot of wheel spinning, to be honest, going on where, you're not seeing a lot of output. And that's, been the last 5 years that I've been looking at that. Haven't been seeing, leaps and bounds in innovations coming from any of these places in and around Brisbane that I've noticed.
Thanks so much for explaining that. I always find it fascinating to kind of get that perspective from different sides of the world too. That was a great question, Spencer. So Adriana, I don't know if you see our text channels, but Adriana said on her discussion channel that she remembers the books where you had to find the little gold bucket, the little gold bug, and she loved those. And you and I are all around the same age bracket. I remember the Richard Scarry books. I love those. And then Inez actually was asking if you could talk about where you are right now and how you and your family have been affected with COVID. And my understanding is that Australia is far better than some parts of the world, but I'd love to hear your perspective.
Absolutely. Right now, I am sitting in my partner's home gym in Tamworth, which is in New South Wales in Australia. My kids live in Brisbane and go to school in Brisbane. And I live there as well and spend maybe a bit under half of my time down here in Tamworth with my partner down here. That's been really challenging through COVID because I don't know if in this around the world what people have done in terms of interstate travel restrictions. But here in Australia, there are 8 states and territories. And when COVID sort of started getting a bit of a run on in March, a number of those borders were closed to varying degrees. So an example would be Tasmania, which is a little island state. So if you imagine Hawaii, the big island of Hawaii, so picture that as Tasmania, and the Premier of Tasmania said, well, that's it. We don't want any COVID coming here at all. We don't have any at the moment, so we're going to close our borders and not let anyone come here. And if you do, so say if you were traveling at the time and you lived there, you could go back, but you had to quarantine for 2 weeks before you were allowed out in the community. So there were those border restrictions put in place. There were also border restrictions put in place between states where you could drive or walk or fly between regularly. So California and Nevada, they're next to each other, I think, aren't they? That border could be the same as between New South Wales and Queensland, and that was closed, and police roadblocks and army personnel involved. And unless you had a specific pass that you had to log online and prove why you had to cross the border, you either weren't allowed to cross, or if you did, you were escorted to hotel quarantine and had to stay in a hotel room for 2 weeks and pay for that yourself, which cost about $3,000. So it massively limited the ability for people to move around the country, which is, it's not doing terrible things to the economy at the moment because the government's propping our economy up with funds. But when that runs out, it's going to be pretty devastating, I think, in terms of what impact it might have. For me personally, so I had been coming down from Queensland to New South Wales, crossing the border legally to see my partner and to see my family who live up the road as well, my mum and my sisters. But then in August, they increased the border restrictions where what I had been doing didn't qualify anymore. And so this is, I guess, the entrepreneur in me. Up until August, I'd been driving about 500 kilometres every couple of weeks and was just saying to family and friends, look, I'm coming from Brisbane, which is a capital city, to these smaller regional towns. If there's any stuff that you want brought down, things from IKEA, gym gear, stuff that maybe you couldn't get in the regional towns, but you could get in the city, I'm happy to throw it in my car and bring it down for you. So I'd been bringing stuff down for nothing, just, as a friend all of the year. And when they closed the borders in August, I couldn't come down to see my mum, my sisters, or my partner for 7 weeks. And I wrote to the government and asked for exemptions and didn't hear anything back, and was just being ignored. So I'm not one to sort of sit around and, told I can't do something if I can see a logical way to do it. So I set up a new business called Pigram Transport and Logistics, which in Australia takes about half an hour to do, and developed some documentation to manage the transport of people and or small freight items, and then started, telling family and friends and advertising a little bit on Facebook that, hey, look, I do this trip every couple of weeks. So if you've got stuff you need taken, let me know. Now, the reason I did that was one of the exemptions to cross the border was if you had a commercial passenger or commercial freight operation going. So once I had that business set up and I had legitimate freight to move, I could then go online, get a border pass and cross the border as much as I want with some caveats in place, but not having to quarantine. That's the main thing, because I look after my kids every second weekend in Brisbane. And so having to do 2 weeks quarantine every time, I just couldn't do it. So I've been doing that now for 3 months, and opportunity tends to breed opportunity because I'm busier now with dropping freight things off for people all over the state than I am with consulting work. So I've found a way, I guess.
Yeah, thanks very much for going through that, Mark. And Ines actually responded, well, this is really interesting and quick to do. And from what I've heard from my parents as well, the situation in Queensland and Brisbane inside the state is pretty comfortable, but going between states is a constant hassle right now. Although I do think that opening up to New Zealand soon.
Yes. Well, the other thing, just for everyone else's benefit, and one of the big drivers, I think, behind the Queensland, New South Wales, that border being so harshly managed, is there was a state election in Queensland last Saturday, so a week ago, or just over a week ago, and they were getting good feedback that most of the state thought having the border closed was a good idea, so they kept it in place until after the election. The government got re-elected, and so now they might consider winding it back a little bit. Most of Australia is open to New Zealand now already. I think it's only Western Australia and Queensland that still aren't letting New Zealanders in, because there's effectively no COVID in New Zealand.
Yeah, that's excellent to hear. Now, one thing I really wanted to ask you about is sort of how you managed to juggle the competing priorities of working as an MD at Illuminate whilst founding your own.
Yeah, sure.
The traveling dads and traveling mums.
I guess I didn't,
because I feel like they're two interesting,
the traveling dads and traveling mums stuff until after I closed my previous business down. And Illuminate now is basically just me. So I bring other people in to do projects, when I have a need for more than just me to do the work. But in the previous business that I had to shut down, I had like 45 people and coverage across 5 states out of the 8 in Australia. So that, there wasn't really a whole lot of spare time to do much on it then. But we were still doing the creative work. Like, we were still creating the stories and making them up. It wasn't really until I went to the boot camp and got the ideas around how I could take it forward that I sort of started putting my head into it really solidly. And that's where some of the project load has helped in terms of having some gaps in consulting work to enable the focus on the traveling dads and traveling mum stuff. But in saying that, to anyone else out there, I'd just say, make a commitment to yourself to set aside some time each day or each week to work on your product or your innovation or whatever it is that your passion is, and you'll make progress. You just have to be disciplined about it. But the important thing is not to overload yourself or stress yourself out about making it all happen. If you just say, yep, I'm going to do a little bit each week or each day, and stick to it, then you make progress and you can manage those competing demands on your time. What I did want to show people, if you go to our website and go to the About tab and scroll down, you'll see some of the examples of the finished illustrations of the first book and how some of them started out in terms of whiteboard sketches and things like that. Oh, just on that one, actually, this is another thing we've done. So if you see down in the bottom right there with a picture of Isla, At the end of each book, we plant the main character for the next book in the scene and have a little, have a little throwaway as to, what's coming next. So at the end of the Dinosaur Kropeck, all the two boys and dad are sitting there eating their saber-toothed tiger on the edge of the creek, and they spot Isle of the Giant Squid in the creek, and the boys yell out, "Hey, who's that?" And Dad says, "That's Isle of the Giant Squid. Let me tell you a story about her." And that's where it ends. And so then the second book is all about Isle of the Giant Squid. So there's all that sort of info if people are interested on the website to have a look at and check out.
That's great. You couldn't hear me because I was muted, but I was laughing. I really love your drawings though, and that you involve your readers and your users, your clients, in kind of the whole process that you go through.
Yeah, thank you.
It feels like you have a clear vision of where you want to go with this, and I have a two-part question for you. So number one, do you have sort of a long-term vision? And then number two, has there been any like major pivot point where you've had to sort of change gears?
Yeah. So first question, long-term vision. Well, medium-term vision is to illustrate and publish the 6 books in the first series. So there's a complete set, and if it doesn't go anywhere from there, then that's okay. But we've got a complete set, and it's done. The longer term vision around the app and things like that, absolutely. What I'd like to see, depending on funding and interest and things like that, is to give people the ability to create their own stories and then have them produced and even have the illustration automated, for example, or have the recording, be able to substitute in your kids' names into the story, but in an automatic way, where you might open the app and just enter in however many main characters there are, and you just say the names that you want in there, and then some AI incorporates that into the existing audio. So then you've got an audio book straight away that incorporates your kids' names, your names, whatever it is. But giving a way for people to create their own content, I think is ultimately where we'd like to go. The pivot point is around, or has been around, COVID particularly. And so an example of that is this time last year, was it? No, a bit before. It was maybe August last year. We signed up our first major client, and sorry, I haven't mentioned this, that our marketing angle, which is another differentiator, isn't to go B2C. So we're not going straight to consumers and competing on the bookshelves in your major bookstores or things like that, because it's too saturated, that market. And so the approach has always been, and still is, a B2B approach, where I've been approaching and engaging with corporate businesses who have employees who have to travel a lot for their work. And it's not a penance, it's just that's the nature of the job. It might be fly in, fly out mine workers, it might be cabin crew on aircraft or pilots, it might be consultants for places like McKinsey or BCG or whatever. A core part of their work is that they have to travel away from family. And so in August last year, we signed up our first major corporate client, which was Virgin Australia, then the second largest airline in Australia. They had 5,000 cabin crew and, 6 or 7,000 people across their cabin crew and pilots. So they bought 200 books and 200 recording slots in the app. And they used those to give out to their pilots and cabin crew who had kids to say, look, here's a well-being initiative that we're undertaking, and it's all about trying to keep you better connected with your kids when you have to travel, because that's a core part of your job. So here's a free book. Here's how it works. Download the app. Use the recording slot to record your own version. So in the app, the whole script of each book is in the app. So you just hit record and start reading the book, and that's recording your version in there. And so that was going to then, we're going to use that to grow further, and had sessions lined up with businesses like Qantas, like Woolworths, a major retailer here, some of the big consulting groups. But then COVID hit, and everyone stopped traveling, and so we've kind of been in a little bit of a hiatus. It's getting close to the point of sort of reinitiating some of those discussions, and I'll be doing that before Christmas. But that's the angle that we're taking it. And I think at any point when a business is like trying to consider, well, fundamentally at the moment, businesses over here are trying to stay alive. Like that's the number one thing. And probably second to that, they're starting to think about people's well-being. So of the businesses that do stay alive, my plan is to re-engage with them as soon as possible, and start talking about that well-being angle, and seeing how we can get some more volume in there and more sales, because with Virgin, that was one sale that equated to 200 units, and then the idea is people get a free recording slot that their business has bought, but then they can buy more recording slots. So in terms of monetizing the business, the idea is that you might have a mom, a dad, an aunt, grandparents. You could have 5 or 6 people where the kids would want to hear a version of a story from each of those different people. So they could each buy a recording slot in the app to record the same story or different stories, whatever they want. But that's the concept there.
That's awesome. I really appreciate you sort of going through that, and to be able to adapt constantly to sort of the different things you're experiencing in the business, I think is super impressive. And on that, I particularly wanted to ask, as I said, I really have been loving hearing about the different marketing ideas you've come up with, such as the collectible cards, and how you've seen places in the market that are flooded and how you've avoided going into them and things like that. So what I wanted to sort of get an idea from you is how you iterate and generate all these different ideas and determine, and what your approach is to determining which ones are worth pursuing and things like that.
Yeah, good question, Spencer. It's a bit of trial and error. For example, two of the main brands we've got are Traveling Dads and Traveling Mums, but then we've got 2 other brands as well, all under the same overall banner, but one is Distant Nans and Pops, and the other is Kids on the Mend. And the idea of all of those was to be able to test different market segments. But the thing I've found, and when COVID hit, my thinking was, okay, well, we need to pivot and start focusing more on the Distant Nans and Pops thing, because lots of older people are being isolated in nursing homes or aged care facilities and not being allowed to see family and friends because of COVID. So this could be a good way for them to interact with grandchildren and the like. But where I haven't found a whole lot of traction there is that it's going back into that B2C space, and the amount of time and effort to get over the hump of onboarding people is in my mind not worth the effort, as opposed to holding off for a little bit until things thaw out a little in terms of travel and things like that, and then going back and targeting the corporates who have people traveling more when people do start to travel. It's not to say that I'm not doing things in those other spaces, but just as a core focus, it's trial and error around going and talking to people and asking them, what do you think about this? So when I do a pitch to a new business or organization, I'm not pitching to say, hey, here's my product, do you want to buy it? I'm saying, hey, here's this product suite we've developed. We've got an idea that it could be applicable, say, to people in aged care facilities. You run aged care facilities. I'd really love to, sit down and have a chat with you and get some ideas to see what you think, if it could be valid or not. And then that sort of changes the whole discussion, because then it's not, oh, look, I'm trying to sell you something. It's like, I value your knowledge in this niche area that I've got an idea, our products might fit, but I don't know that area well enough. You do. Let's talk about it and see how it can work. And that has led to some different changes and tweaks to some of what we've actually got in the product and how it works. So that's how I've kind of approached that. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I was even trying to think a little bit myself on whether or not you could have like plush toys or something after the main characters.
Yeah. Oh, my kids are itching for that level of the business to arrive. I can tell you.
That's great. I think that's a great idea. Actually, when you were talking about Kohl's and Woolworths, I was thinking that's often sort of how they do that giveaway. And they even kind of coordinate that with a cause too. So I don't know if that's something that's in your future vision, but I could definitely I can envision that you can go in a lot of different meaningful directions with something like this. Personally, I actually really love the idea of collaborating the reading on the app, because I have a family that's pretty spread out. And I think it's a really cool thing to be able to do for some of my nieces and nephews. So I think there's a lot of value in that idea. So we've got just a couple minutes before the end of the hour, and I just want to make sure you have a couple more minutes and you don't have somebody waiting on you.
No, I'm all good. Yep.
We usually ask people kind of towards the end to give us some sort of words of wisdom that either someone's passed on to them or just sort of some philosophy that you live by. So you can use that however you like, but if you have any advice for us, we'd love it.
Yeah, in the entrepreneurial space, I guess not the advice that I give, but what I do is be a doer, not a gunner. Meaning there are so many people out there who are going to do this and they're going to do that, and they're going to have a go at this or that and never do anything. To me, if you want to learn and experience and try things out, then you've got to do something. Like, you can't just sit back and let it happen and wait for it to come to you. You've got to get off your ass and make it happen. And you don't know where it's going to take you. So like I said before, the whole COVID thing has put a real slowdown on the projected pathway that I had for traveling dads and traveling mums. But the approach that I've been taking to it means that, well, that's okay. It wasn't the 100% focus. It was one of a number of balls that I've been juggling to keep things going and keep things interesting. And so it's okay if it slows down a little bit. There are some benefits to that. So that would be my advice. Find time to have a go and start doing things, and be creative about how you do it. One of the things that has slowed us up this year has been with the initial iOS app development. So I partnered with QUT, Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, and their IT and computer software departments every year are always struggling to find industry projects for their final year students to do their final year development work on. So I worked with them and partnered with them. Got an awesome team of 4 guys who developed the iOS app for me for free. So I didn't pay a cent for it. But what I did do to incentivize them to do a good job and finish it in the year that they had to do their final subject was I signed them on to revenue share agreements, so that if it took off, that they'd get a share of the app purchases, or in-app purchases, sorry, for 3 years, I think, after it was finished. Because in that final year subject, it was a bit flexible around, do your best to try and develop a finished product. But if you don't, it's okay. It's more just learning the theory and the process and things like that. And I said to the guys, well, that's great for you guys at uni, but I want a product. So the way I'm going to whip you into shape and make sure you get me a product is I'm going to incentivize you by giving you the potential for a bite of the carrot at the end of the day. And they produced a fantastic product. And now 2 of them are still helping me on the Android app, still with the same incentives, but because the combination of the monetary incentives and the university incentives aren't there, and they're now working as well, it's been a lot slower. So the reason I tell that story is just think outside the box. Think of how you can bootstrap things, in the early stages, just to get your minimal viable product available to be able to show people and get feedback on it.
Thank you very much, Mark. That, I think, is a perfect quote. I've actually thrown that into a little quote channel down below. Be a doer, not a gunner. Love it. And Ines said, same as I just did, this is good, be a doer. And this is a good incentive, good idea. Think outside the box. Totally agree on that. I think motivating the students in the way you did is both creative and incredibly a good idea. I think at this point, since we've just gone a little bit over the hour, we might wrap up, if that's all right with you, Mark.
Absolutely. No, happy to do that. Thank you again so much for the opportunity. If anyone has got more questions or anything like that, please reach out to me in any one of the channels. The guys sent out all my contact details. Have a look on the website. We can ship the books to wherever. You can get the app on iOS for free. For the troops who are not in Australia, Nancy can attest to the ebook versions, which is a good way of still being able to access them, but cheaper and easier way than the physical ones. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We really appreciate you bringing your perspective and energy to today's discussion. Have a lovely day, everyone, and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mark. This was awesome.
No worries, Nancy. Thanks, everyone.
This has been Nancy and Spencer on Founders Voyage Weekly Podcast. Our speaker each week can be reached through our Discord server. Our intro and outro music is from the song Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band. We'll be back again next week for another episode. Until then, have a great day and continue your voyage.